Brace yourselves. I'm about to say something that is very controversial. Trump is not president-elect in the United States because he has not been determined to be the president. And I don't care how many elections he wins, or how many supporters he has, or how much money he spent, or whatever to win the presidency. No, he's not the president-elect. In fact, those who make the decision don't even have to consider him at all. Period. And I'm not saying that because Harris would be any different, because she's not. She doesn't have any. No, but she's not entitled to be considered either. And so we have to understand. We have to get back to who determines the choice, and how is the choice determined? Well, I'm gonna cut to the chase. The states, as the union assembled in Congress, determine the choice, and they have to have choices to consider. And each state has a right, since this is a democracy of the states, all the states are equal with equal suffrage. Every state has a right to have some of their own citizens considered for everything in our government. So all that the electors are doing is providing choices that can be considered by the states. And there's no, there is a minimum number of choices that they have decided they wanted to consider. And that number is 5. And that comes from Article 2, Section 1, Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution of the United States. And the 12th Amendment did not do anything to change that number 5, because all they did was force the electors to indicate on their 2 ballots which was cast for president and which was cast for vice president. And then they split the number to be considered into 3 for president and 2 for vice president. So when the first thing that the states are going to do when they open those certificates is to see if they have people to consider. And if you don't give them any, how can they consider anything to make their choice? The states, he's the president of the United States. He represents the United States in Congress assembled when foreign entities come into the United States. He only says what the United States in Congress assembled tell him to say. He doesn't have any authority to say or do anything himself. He has to have the advice and consent of the states as a union to do or say anything in the United States. And if he is insubordinate and says what he wants to say, then that's an immediate impeachment. And if we understand how the impeachment process works, the president is removed from office on impeachment 4. That creates an absence until the states in the Senate can consider the impeachment and determine whether he can return to office or if he is permanently removed, which creates a vacancy. And the vice president doesn't become the president. The vice president acts as the president until the reason for the absence is removed or a new president is elected, which can happen immediately. The states can immediately determine the time of choosing of the electors, being that day or the next day, and the day on which they'll give their vote, which can still be the next day, and set as a time for those votes, those certificates of the list of persons for them to consider is transmitted to the seat of government directed to the president and the Senate, where they will consider the names on that list and determine a choice by vote, one vote per state, and a majority of all the states necessary to the choice. So they don't even have to consider Trump at all, because the list don't meet the requirements that they established for the list of candidates that they want to consider. That's almost like the nomination process. The president gets to give them one person to consider. How is that advice and consent? No. You don't get to make the choice. You give the states the number of nominees they say they want, with the qualifications they determine they want. And they will consider those nominees and make a choice by vote, one vote per state, and the majority of all the states is necessary to the choice. Why? Because it's a democracy. Every state has an equal vote, and a majority of all the states is necessary to the choice. That is democracy. Do I have to explain democracy to you any further? Okay? And then the first requirement to even be considered for the presidency is you have to have a majority of all the states, all the electors, to become president on the votes of the electors. And what does that mean? Well, the electors, there's an identity, mathematical identity, which goes like this. If A is proportional to B and B equals C, then A is proportional to C. And in that scenario, A is all the people of the United States. Man, woman, child. As long as they reside in the United States and they're a citizen of the United States, they are represented in the United States, in the House. Okay? And the electors are equal to the whole number of representatives, which is directly proportional to all the people. So to be elected by the electors alone, you need a majority of all the people, and you can't even get a majority of all the people in a state to choose Trump. And this artificial thing about winner takes all of electoral college votes is total nonsense. Where'd they get that from? That's not a majority. You can't win a majority support from your state, and so they can't even agree on who to consider, because Trump. The Republicans only have 11% of all the people in the country. In a state like Colorado, with a 67%, 2/3 majority, a 2/3 registered electorate, only 1/3 of that 2/3 is the Republicans. Okay? Of the voters. So that's 67% of 33% of 67%. You can't get to a majority that way. For a state to determine that person is the only person to be considered. That's what they're trying to do. The states have a right to have their own choices considered. And that second vote, which says that each elector must choose a person that does not reside in their state, forces those electors to choose someone nationally that they think is qualified, that doesn't reside in their state. And I guarantee you that if you have 5.5 million people in the state of Colorado, and you have 190 something electors, that you better have a bunch of people, at least 80 or 90 people from the state of Colorado on that thing. What? State of Colorado doesn't have anybody that could be the president that's qualified, that meets the requirements? So they can't even consider anything because they don't have any candidates to consider because of the way that they have bastardized the electoral process. Only the states can determine the choice. Only. They either do it proportionally through their electors, or they do it by as equals. But it's still the states determining the choice. Nobody's entitled to be considered just for winning the election. You need a majority of the states is necessary to the choice. Okay? And if the states don't like the choices you gave them because you didn't do it the right way, they don't have to accept your certificates at all. And if they don't have 2/3 of the state's certificates to form a quorum, then the election is invalid. Totally. They cannot choose a president. And then you have to ask the question, do they even need a president? Okay, so they don't choose a president today. What does that do? Nothing. Because the president doesn't have any leadership or decision-making role in our government. Period. The United States in Congress assembled is the established government authority. And they make all the decisions how? By a majority consensus of all the states assembled as the Union in a Congress. And what is that majority consensus that they need? Well, it depends on what they're deciding. Because some of it is going to be 2/3 of the states has got to do it. Okay? You have to have 2/3 of the states to form a majority consensus for things like this. To choose the president, if you do it the Republican way, which is proportionally to get all the candidates, and then equal to determine the choice, that can be a majority by a majority, simple majority. But if you don't have that, you need 2/3 majority. You need 2/3 of the states to agree to anything. And in fact, to amend the Constitution, you need 3/4 of the states to consent. Do you understand that? 3/4. That means, but why? Because those are the states' rights that are established by the Constitution of the United States. And you just can't decide to change the states' rights for how they participate in the union and make collective decisions together. That's what the Constitution does. That's what democracy is. It's a process for them to make collective decisions by a majority consensus of all the states as the union. They all have to participate as equals, and they have to have equal suffrage. And they always have equal suffrage because they are apportioned suffrage in the House equally per capita. That's equal based on the number of citizens they have in each state. And they have equal suffrage in the Senate. Period. Each state has one vote. So yes, each state has equal suffrage. Always. And all things determined in our government have to be made by a majority consensus of all the states as the union. Do I have to say it again? You all talk about democracy all the damn you want. But how come it is you don't really want to practice democracy? Democracy is about equality of participation and equal suffrage to determine choices. You participate in determining the choices. Then you vote to determine the choice you want to make. That's democracy. If you don't understand that, then we have a lot more things to do in America and in the world to actually understand what we're doing that we call government. Because this competition politics bullshit has to end. Period. Today. Thank you.